Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling an investigation that's really caused a stir internationally. It's sending shockwaves, frankly.
Yes, it is. We're looking at alleged, well, actually documented, deep-seated links between federal agencies, the military of the United States of America, and global networks involved in drug and arms trafficking.
It stems from a very comprehensive piece of journalistic work led by Juan Manuel Ledesma. And the term that's now being used in many international media outlets is the cartel United States of America.
That's the label being applied, yes. Our aim here is to really unpack the verified facts, the connections that have been laid bare, and the evidence presented in these reports. We want you, the listener, to grasp the full picture of what's being alleged here.
Okay, so let's start right there. This investigation really turns the conventional wisdom about the global drug trade on its head, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It argues that the biggest money laundering operations aren't happening, in Colombia or Mexico, but on Wall Street. And crucially, these reports state that these operations are shielded by intelligence agencies and the federal government of the United States itself.
The numbers involved are just, well, they're huge.
They are devastating. The reports confirm at least $100 billion annually from the drug trade being laundered through American banks.
$100 billion.
Yes. And what's truly staggering, perhaps, is that only about 1 to 5% of that flow is ever detected.
1 to 5%? That's tiny.
Exactly. The investigation doesn't frame this as simple oversight or failure. It suggests a systemic integration, something designed almost.
So if the money's ending up on Wall Street, what happens to the traffickers themselves, the ones we usually think of as the bosses?
Well, this is another key finding. The investigation details how major traffickers are essentially retiring with impunity in cities like Miami, New York, Los Angeles.
Retiring? How?
They acquire visas, properties, luxury lifestyles, apparently with very few obstacles. This documented pattern, you see, it really forces a rethink about who holds the real power.
So the argument is that the real kingpins aren't necessarily the ones in the field.
Precisely. The investigation makes the case very strongly. The actual kingpins operate from Washington and Wall Street. They're protected, it seems, by a whole ecosystem of complicity banks, intelligence agencies, even elite military bases are mentioned. The ultimate bosses, the Mero Meros, as some sources apparently call them, they're not in the poppy fields. They're north of the Rio Grande.
It paints a picture of a sort of narco state operating within the state itself.
That's a stark way to put it, but yes, that's the implication derived from the evidence presented.
And this alleged influence doesn't stop at finance, does it? The investigation goes into politics, specifically linking figures in recent administrations.
It does. It examines what it calls political shielding and dubious finance. Allegations have surfaced, particularly in recent months, linking financial support of, let's say, highly questionable origin to Donald Trump's government.
And how is this supposed to have worked?
Reportedly channeled through a proprietary meme coin. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, a meme coin is a type of cryptocurrency, often based on internet jokes. But here, the investigation alleges it was specifically designed as a covert way to move money.
A sort of shadowy financial tool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the investigation presents this not as a one-off, but part of a wider pattern where these meme coins act as a conduit for political financing and money laundering. It's described as a gray area where crypto, campaign donations, and narco capital potentially meet.
The investigation names specific individuals allegedly central to this. Marco Rubio, for instance.
Yes, Marco Rubio, now serving as Secretary of State in Donald Trump's second presidency. He's reportedly known in Colombian and Mexican trafficking circles as El Cuñado, the brother-in-law.
Why that name?
It stems from his family ties to a convicted cocaine trafficker in Miami. The investigation claims this nickname reflects a widespread belief within those circles that his political position is tied to these, murky interests. And specifically, it states he shielded these meme coin operations.
Right. And then there's Pam Bondi, the Attorney General.
Indeed. The investigation notes intensified criticism of her in Congress. Her career is highlighted for unwavering loyalty to Donald Trump. A key point mentioned is a $25,000 donation she received from him back in 2013.
And the timing of that was significant.
According to the reports, yes. It was days before her office dropped an investigation into alleged fraud at Trump University. This raises serious questions, naturally, about potential conflicts of interest and judicial integrity.
And her role within the Department of Justice.
Well, multiple investigations cited in the main report. State Bondi has worked very closely with agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and the Drug Enforcement Administration. This happens within the Department of Justice's Special Investigations Unit, the SIU.
Okay.
Officially, these are anti-narcotics missions, but the investigation reveals they often served a dual purpose as cover for financial maneuvers and protecting political allies.
So the picture emerging is one of interconnectedness.
Extremely interconnected. Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Pam Bondi. They appear, according to this investigation, woven into a network where meme coins, donations, judicial actions, and covert operations all intersect.
And the conclusion drawn isn't that they failed to stop the drug trade.
Quite the opposite. The conclusion presented is that this system has actually turned the drug trade into a resource, a source of funds, and, perhaps more disturbingly, a currency for political negotiation and control.
Which leads to the question, if this system protects those at the top, who bears the risk? Who pays the price on the ground?
This brings us to a figure the investigation calls the gray man, a really shadowy type of operative.
Scarcely documented, it says.
That's right, external operators. No badge, no official public record. But, crucially, they do have an internal file, a number registered with the United States Attorney General's office.
And their purpose.
They're deployed for missions where the main agencies, Drug Enforcement Administration, Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, National Security Agency, all coordinated by this SIU, cannot officially be seen.
So deniable assets.
Essentially, yes. They infiltrate cartels, gather intelligence, carry out actions that the federal agencies then use. Their existence is officially deniable, yet they're managed internally.
The investigation details a specific, chilling example in Argentina.
It does. An operative, after 3 years working undercover in Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Mexico, he gets sent to Argentina.
And what did he find?
He uncovered links between staff at the United States Embassy in Buenos Aires and Argentine officials, politicians, ministers, police chiefs, military figures, all allegedly connected to local drug bosses.
So he reported it, as per protocol.
He did. And the response from his superiors in Washington, according to the investigation, immediate betrayal.
Betrayal? How?
He was arrested, it says, on fabricated charges. This was apparently done with the cooperation of ministers in Javier Milei's government, judges, prosecutors, police chiefs. His cover was blown, and he was simply abandoned, left exposed.
To protect the network he'd uncovered?
That's the conclusion drawn. To ensure those criminal networks and the connections to them could keep operating. It's a stark illustration of how these operatives are viewed as expendable.
And this isn't presented as an isolated case of betrayal.
No. The investigation points to a pattern. It mentions Operation Neptune, that incident with the Sea Paradise tug near the Canary Islands in November 2023. Operatives involved in a covert Drug Enforcement Administration action were similarly disowned after it was exposed by Spanish media and Univision.
There are other examples too, right? Something involving the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia?
Yes, reports from August 2025. An alleged Central Intelligence Agency agent detained in a Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia camp. Under interrogation, he reportedly confessed to working for Senator Marco Rubio El Cuñado, again, to facilitate drug routes and laundering.
With official backing.
He claimed backing from Southern Command and diplomatic cover via the United States Embassy in Bogotá. These are serious claims unearthed by the investigation.
And that drone incident in Colombia. Arauca, October 2022.
Shocking details there. A drone films the execution of 2 Colombian Army NCOs by FARC dissidents. But the disturbing part is the drone's behavior.
What did it do?
It reportedly veered away inexplicably before the killings, only returning after the soldiers were dead. This raises profound questions about the drone's actual mission and operator, feeding into allegations of possible United States or Special Forces involvement under the umbrella of Plan Colombia.
So these gray men are essentially the disposable front line, sacrificed when necessary.
That's the grim picture painted by these documented cases, yes. Pawns in a much larger game.
Now, let's shift focus slightly to Mexico.
Yeah.
The investigation argues that what looks like local corruption there is actually something else.
Yes, it argues it's not just local failure, but rather the enforcement arm of this larger transnational structure of impunity directed from Washington.
So Mexican corruption serves the system.
That's the assertion. It's about administering the drug trade, not ending it. This means managing the flow, choosing preferred partners, often the most ruthless but predictable ones, to maintain control and leverage.
The case of Genaro Garcia Luna is presented as key here, Mexico's former public security secretary.
Right. The investigation frames him not as some rogue element, but as the ideal operator for this system. His conviction in Brooklyn in 2023 for drug trafficking and taking massive bribes from the Sinaloa cartel
Yes.
is presented less as justice served and more as the discarding of an asset who was no longer useful, perhaps even a liability.
And Maricela Morales Ibanez, former Attorney General of the Republic.
Another significant case study in the investigation. Serious allegations detail her facilitating cartel operations, using state institutions like the Federal Preventive Police to shield drug shipments, even fabricating cases.
Despite all that, she maintained close ties with U.S. agencies.
Exactly. Drug Enforcement Administration, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Central Intelligence Agency. She was even, quite incredibly, honored by the United States Department of Justice for her supposed fight against drug trafficking.
Which seems to perfectly illustrate the point about rewarding usefulness within this framework, regardless of actual actions.
Precisely. It shows a system, according to the investigation, that prioritizes operational utility over genuine anti-crime efforts.
And General Salvador Cienfuegos, former defense secretary.
His case is perhaps the most blatant example of high-level protection. Arrested by the Drug Enforcement Administration in 2020, massive political pressure followed. He was released, sent back to Mexico, and his impunity was quickly restored.
Shows how untouchable certain figures can become.
It starkly demonstrates the shields in place for senior players and how negotiations happen far above the level of formal justice.
The investigation also mentions large-scale projects, like in Nuevo Vallarta.
Yes, the tourism and real estate development there in Nayarit, reportedly financed entirely by the Sinaloa cartel.
What's the significance of that?
These developments are presented as creating strategic zones of autonomy, places where intelligence operatives, undercover agents, cartel figures can all coexist under a sort of institutional protection. It echoes historical patterns like Central Intelligence Agency using front operations.
So, pulling this thread together, the argument is systemic.
Absolutely. The investigation asserts United States agencies aren't fighting a war on drugs, they're administering the drug trade.
They prefer corrupt but predictable partners.
Because they facilitate intelligence gathering, territorial control, even covert actions in other countries. So the corruption seen in Mexico isn't a bug, it's presented as a feature. It channels money to Wall Street and maintains a network that serves Washington's geopolitical goals. Impunity isn't an accident, it's built in.
And this reaches into the military itself, specifically Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty.
Yes, regarded as the largest, most influential military base in the United States of America. And recent journalistic and judicial investigations, cited extensively, have implicated personnel there in drug trafficking and serious arms smuggling.
It started with a double murder.
That was the catalyst for wider exposure, yes. December 2020. Sergeant Major William Levine II, a Delta Force operator, and Staff Sergeant Timothy Dumas Sr., a logistics specialist with Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC, found shot dead.
Not just a random crime.
Sources cited in journalist Seth Harp's investigation describe them as executions, score settling within smuggling operations. His book, The Fort Bragg Cartel, published August 2025, lays out how these deaths were part of a much larger network.
What did the network involve?
Elite soldiers trafficking opioids, cocaine, fentanyl, and, crucially, using military aircraft to transport drugs from places like Afghanistan and Mexico directly onto the base.
Military planes used for drug running.
That's the documented claim.
Yep.
And it wasn't just drugs. There was also clandestine sale of military-grade weapons.
What kind of weapon?
Assault rifles, machine guns, grenades, bazookas, even miniguns and explosives. Sold to organizations like Los Zetas in Mexico.
Creating an iron pipeline of weapons to cartels.
That's the term used, yes. And Harp's book notes the disturbing fact that some individuals who later formed Los Zetas actually received training at United States facilities, including Fort Bragg itself, years ago, applying military tactics to crime.
There was testimony from a former Drug Enforcement Administration agent, too.
Yes. Freddie Wayne Huff II, sentenced to 21 years in November 2023. He confirmed Fort Bragg military personnel were actively involved in drug and arms trafficking. He actually partnered with Timothy Dumas, the murdered logistics specialist.
And Dumas was his link.
His link into what Huff described as a drug trafficking group within the military, composed of special forces soldiers who, in his words, had gone to the dark side during their deployments in Afghanistan.
So the Afghanistan connection is seen as key to how this developed.
The investigation suggests that interventions there, turning Afghanistan into the world's largest narco state during the occupation, created the routes, the contacts, the logistics that allowed these corrupt networks within the military to funnel drugs back into North America.
And this isn't just historical, it's ongoing.
Updates suggest it persists. January 2024, a former soldier convicted for trafficking ketamine, laundering huge sums. July 2025, another arrest at Fort Liberty for possession with intent to sell fentanyl enough to kill thousands. So, despite internal army probes, the problem clearly hasn't gone away.
Which makes former President Trump's talk of sending the military to Mexico quite ironic, as Seth Hart points out.
Karp does frame it as ironic, suggesting a look closer to home is needed. The investigation presents this Fort Bragg scandal not as some isolated anomaly, but a symptom of a system where impunity is often prioritized, supposedly in the name of national security.
So bringing all these threads together,
Yeah,
the overall picture is quite damning.
it is unequivocal based on the evidence compiled. Money laundering from drug trafficking isn't just happening in the United States. It's presented as a structural pillar of the financial and political system.
And there's historical context for this. Declassified documents.
Yes. Documents declassified in 2024 reportedly revealed the Central Intelligence Agency actually permitted money laundering in United States banks back in the 2010s.
Permitted it. Why?
To fund covert operations in Latin America. The stated pretext was controlling drug trafficking. But the investigation argues that allowing these illicit funds into legitimate channels, even for covert purposes, ultimately strengthened the cartel's ability to embed themselves in the legal economy, making them harder to root out later.
And the scale of laundering now remains vast.
A congressional report cited for 2025 found at least $120 billion in illicit funds laundered via United States banks in 2024 alone, and less than 3% detected. It underscores the sheer scale of this, well, systemic complicity.
Which brings us to another sensitive point raised in the investigation, the handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case.
Yes, a particularly alarming development noted under the second Trump administration. In July 2025, the Department of Justice, led by Pam Bondi, refused to release the full records relating to Jeffrey Epstein.
Despite campaign promises of transparency.
Despite those promises, yes. This refusal has fueled accusations, documented in the investigation, that it's an effort to protect the president and other powerful figures, especially since reports revealed Bondi had apparently informed Donald Trump back in May that his name appeared in those case documents.
And there's speculation this lack of transparency could be linked to foreign policy.
Some analysts, cited in the reporting, speculate that escalating tensions, the ramped-up rhetoric against countries like Iran and China might be partly a maneuver, a way to create an external threat to unify the country and distract from potential political fallout from domestic scandals like this. It fits the pattern described, using geopolitical moves to obscure internal issues.
So the final conclusion of this exhaustive work.
It's stark. The real kingpins, the investigation concludes, aren't hiding in jungles or mountains. They operate from the offices of Wall Street, the corridors of Washington, and the military bases that, instead of fighting the drug trade, have effectively integrated it into the machinery of geopolitics and finance. Impunity isn't a flaw. It's presented as the fundamental design of the system.
Well, this deep dive has certainly laid bare some complex and deeply disturbing findings from this investigation. It paints a picture where the lines between the state and organized crime appear blurred, to say the least, where impunity seems structurally embedded.
It really does.
It certainly challenges you, the listener, to fundamentally reconsider the global war on drugs, what it really is, and who truly benefits from its complex, often hidden machinery. What stands out most to you from all this? What questions does it raise about the institutions we often trust and the narratives we tend to accept?